ask you something. When was the last time you paused long enough to check the state of your heart? I'm not talking about how well you're keeping up with the chaos around you. I'm not asking how busy your calendar is, how well your family is doing, or how successful your ministry looks from the outside. I'm asking about you. Not your image, not your responsibilities. I mean the woman or the man behind the smile. The one who lays down at night and wrestles with silent questions. The one who gives to others, but rarely takes a moment to give attention to the soul that God so carefully created and called. You see, the enemy knows something that we often forget. He knows that if he can keep you focused on everything and everyone else, if he can distract you with noise and obligations and people pleasing and endless doing, he can keep you from tending the very place where your strength comes from, your spirit. And he knows if he can do that, he can drain your power, rob your peace, and keep you moving in circles instead of walking in destiny. We live in a world that celebrates self-sacrifice, but often misunderstands the purpose of it. Don't misunderstand me. Serving others is biblical. Laying your life down for others is the model Jesus gave us. But listen carefully. Service that is not rooted in identity becomes slavery. When you serve out of emptiness, you don't serve people, you drain yourself. You end up trying to pour from a well that's gone dry, and everyone suffers. The people you're trying to help won't get the best of you, and you'll resent the very people you're trying to love. That's why you must focus on yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a spiritual way. You must become aware of what's happening inside of you before you can be effective on the outside. God never called you to abandon your heart while trying to save the world. He called you to guard your heart because from it flow the issues of life. That's what Proverbs 4:23 says. And if the issues of life are flowing from it, don't you think it deserves your attention? Sometimes we carry burdens God never told us to carry. We say yes to things we were never assigned to do. We carry guilt for saying no, so we stretch ourselves thin and call it obedience. But it's not obedience, it's fear. It's fear of disappointing people, fear of being seen as less spiritual, fear of being misunderstood. So we neglect the voice inside of us that's whispering, this isn't your weight to carry. And instead we press on exhausted because we're too afraid to be still. But let me tell you something, your stillness is not laziness. Your pause is not weakness. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop. Stop and breathe. Stop and listen. Stop and ask God, is this even mine to do? Because if it's not, then your striving is not service, it's disobedience. You can only be responsible for what God has assigned to you. And sometimes the first assignment is to get your own heart right before you try to help anyone else. The enemy wants you to think that focusing on yourself is selfish. He wants you to feel guilty for stepping back, for resting, for reflecting, for being honest about your own needs. He wants you to believe that unless you're doing something for someone else 24/7, then you're wasting your life. But God didn't design you to be busy. He designed you to be fruitful. And fruit doesn't grow in chaos. Fruit grows in stillness, in rootedness, in abiding. John 15 tells us to abide in him, not perform for him, not impress others in his name. Abide. How can you abide if you're running on empty? How can you hear his voice if your mind is clouded with everybody else's opinions? How can you walk in purpose if you don't even know who you are when you're alone? This is why focusing on yourself isn't optional, it's essential. You've got to stop outsourcing your identity to people who didn't create you. You've got to stop looking to applause or affirmation to tell you who you are. You've got to learn how to sit in silence long enough to hear the whisper of the Spirit again. Sometimes God isolates you because he wants to reintroduce you to you. He wants to show you that you are more than what you do. You are more than who likes you. You are more than what you produce. You are more than your past. He wants to strip away all the things you've used to define yourself so he can speak identity over you that isn't based on your performance but on his promise. You can't give what you don't have. You can't lead others if you haven't learned how to lead yourself. You can't pour into others if you haven't allowed God to pour into you. And pouring into you often requires you to shut off the noise It requires you to shut down the distractions, even if they come in good forms, friends, family, ministry, work, and say, right now, I need to tend to my soul. I need to be filled before I can overflow. There are people in your life who have grown accustomed to your yes. And when you start focusing on yourself, when you start protecting your peace and making space for God to work on you, they might not understand. That's okay. Let them misunderstand. You're not responsible for their reactions. You're responsible for your obedience. And sometimes obedience looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like not answering the phone. Sometimes it looks like saying, not this season. You will never reach your full potential if you're constantly distracted by people who expect you to be everything to them while you are nothing to yourself. That's not sacrifice, that's spiritual sabotage. And God never asked you to kill yourself emotionally in order to be seen as spiritual. That's not faithfulness. That's dysfunction. You are not doing God any favors by neglecting yourself. He wants you healthy. He wants you whole. He wants you healed, not just so you can help others, but because he loves you. Not your work, you. Not your gifts, you. Not your usefulness, you. And until you believe that, you will keep trying to earn your place in the kingdom instead of resting in the truth that you already belong. You can't fake wholeness. You can't pretend healing. You can't manufacture fruit by hustling. Real transformation comes when you make space for God to deal with your stuff, not your neighbor's stuff, not your spouse's stuff, your stuff. And that takes focus. It takes intentionality. It takes courage to look in the mirror and say, I've got some things I need to deal with. I've got some wounds I need to bring to God. I've got some habits that need to be broken. I've got some forgiveness that needs to happen. I've got some healing that I've been avoiding. This is not the time to keep distracting yourself with other people's problems. This is the time to focus on the one heart you have control over, your own, because God wants to use you, yes, but not at the expense of you. He doesn't need a burnt out version of you limping through life pretending to be okay. He wants the real you, the honest you, the broken but surrendered you. The tired but willing you, the humble you, who says, Lord, I don't want to just be seen doing good things. I want to be whole. Stop running from yourself. Stop running to everyone else's chaos so you don't have to deal with your own silence. Stop calling dysfunction normal just because it's familiar. Get still, get quiet, get honest. Focus. Focus on your walk. Focus on your thoughts. Focus on your healing. Focus on your relationship with the Lord. Focus on your identity. Focus on the things that really matter, because everything else will flow from that. When your foundation is weak, everything you build will be shaky. But when your foundation is strong, when your identity is rooted in Christ, when your soul is anchored in his truth, when your mind is renewed by his word, then everything else can fall into place. You'll serve from overflow. You'll love from overflow. You'll give from overflow. You'll show up in relationships as a whole person, not someone looking for others to complete them. But it starts with you, not with your spouse, not with your kids, not with your job, not with your ministry. It starts with the heart you carry into all those places. And that heart needs your attention. It needs your care. It needs your surrender. And most of all, it needs God's presence. Nothing can substitute for that. Not activity, not applause, not affirmation. Only his presence can fill the emptiness. And to receive it, you must slow down long enough to seek it. You owe it to yourself to get well, not just for the people who count on you, not just for your purpose, but because you are worth healing. You are worth peace. You are worth rest. You are worth wholeness. You are not just a vessel to be used. You are a child to be loved. And when you focus on yourself with that truth in mind, everything changes. You begin to show up differently. You begin to move differently. You begin to serve with joy, not resentment. You begin to say no without guilt. You begin to live from a place of overflow. Don't wait until you break down to focus on your well-being. Don't wait until you're burned out to prioritize your soul. Don't wait until God has to force you into rest. Choose to focus now. Choose to prioritize the presence of God in your life now. Choose to surrender the distractions now. Choose to step into healing now. You don't have to earn rest. You just have to receive it. Let the world keep spinning. Let the demands keep calling. You focus. You center yourself in the truth. You root yourself in love. You guard your heart, because when that heart is whole, the life that flows from it will be full of grace, peace, and divine strength. We are often trained by life, by culture, and sometimes even by church circles to look outward when something feels broken inside, to look at what people did, what systems failed, what relationships hurt us, what circumstances wounded us. And while those things may be real, they are not the beginning point of true transformation. The real shift happens when we stop pointing outward and turn inward, when we ask the Spirit of God not just to fix what happened around us, but to search us, try us, and reveal what's happening within us. The process of healing does not begin at the hands of others, but in the presence of the one who made us. It doesn't begin with external validation. It begins in the quiet, sacred moments when we stop long enough to let God place his hands on the broken places and speak life. God is not interested in surface solutions. He is a God of depth. He is not after a bandage on your soul. He wants to go down to the root. He wants to pull up every lie you've believed, every identity you've adopted that wasn't his idea, every wound you've hidden behind busyness, every fear you've called personality, every cycle you've called normal. And that kind of work cannot happen in the noise. It cannot happen in distraction. It cannot happen while you're fixing everyone else, but never addressing your own heart. That kind of work happens when you choose to focus inward, when you make space, when you shut down the distractions, when you bring your full self, your broken self, your honest self, your exhausted self to the feet of the one who sees you completely and still chooses to love you deeply. We have mastered the art of hiding in plain sight. We know how to smile when we're shattered. We know how to quote scriptures while silently suffering. We know how to serve while secretly struggling. But God is not impressed with your performance. He is moved by your surrender. And surrender happens when you stop trying to be strong for everyone else and finally admit to yourself and to God, I need healing. That moment of honesty is where restoration begins. Not when you get it all together, not when the pain stops hurting, but when you invite him into the mess you've been trying to manage alone, when you stop avoiding and start abiding. God is not overwhelmed by your wounds. He's not shocked by your past. He's not put off by your anxiety, your doubt, your struggle. He already knows it all. And still, he waits for your invitation. He waits for the moment you stop numbing, stop running, stop pretending, and start engaging. He waits for the moment you sit down in his presence and say, Lord, show me me. Not the me I present to the world, not the me I think I have to be loved, not the me shaped by trauma or rejection, but the real me, the one you knit together, the one you called, the one you're still reaching for. This is the beginning of healing, when you stop using spiritual activity to hide emotional pain, when you stop covering the wound and start uncovering it, when you stop blaming others and start asking God, what in me needs your touch? It's not about self-obsession. It's about self-awareness led by the Spirit. It's about allowing the light of God to shine into the dark corners you've avoided for years. It's about realizing that you are not your trauma. You are not your mistake. You are not your failure. You are not the opinion spoken over you. You are who God says you are. But until you silence the other voices and focus inward, you'll never fully believe his. Restoration doesn't happen when everything around you gets fixed. It happens when your inner life gets aligned. That's why Jesus so often asks people, do you want to be made whole? Not, do you want your situation to change, but do you want you to change? Because sometimes we're so focused on external deliverance that we resist internal transformation. We want God to fix them, fix it, fix that, while ignoring the places where he wants to fix us. And God, in his mercy, loves us too much to allow us to keep walking in cycles. So he waits until we finally get tired enough of pretending and performing, until we finally get desperate enough to focus inward. until we finally realize that the real breakthrough begins not out there, but right here, in the place nobody else can see. It is in that sacred inward focus that purpose is born, because God didn't just create you to survive pain. He created you to rise from it with purpose. He created you to walk through the fire and come out refined, not burned. But you'll never discover that purpose if you're always avoiding the process of looking in the mirror, the process of asking hard questions, the process of healing childhood wounds, the process of facing the fear behind your busyness, the process of letting go of bitterness, the process of confronting shame. That's where purpose is shaped. Not in applause, not in platforms, but in the secret place where God rebuilds you from the inside out. There is power in focus, power in slowing down long enough to see yourself clearly, power in facing what you've tried to ignore. Because when you face it with God, you don't face it alone. He meets you there. He ministers to you there. He puts his hand on the wound and says, this too I can heal, but only if you'll stop running from it. Only if you'll stop calling it something it's not. Only if you'll let him peel back the layers you've wrapped around your soul to survive. Because surviving is not the same as living. And he didn't call you to just survive. He called you to live, to thrive, to walk in freedom. But freedom takes focus. And not the kind of focus that looks around at everybody else's brokenness, the kind that looks within, the kind that says, what am I believing that isn't true? The kind that says, what lie did I agree with that is now shaping how I live? The kind that says, where am I performing instead of receiving? The kind that asks God to search the heart, test the thoughts, and lead you in the way everlasting. That kind of focus doesn't feel good at first. It's uncomfortable, it's vulnerable, it's humbling, but it's also the path to healing. Because God doesn't bless the person you pretend to be. He blesses the person you really are when you bring that person to him. You will not stumble into wholeness. You must pursue it. You must protect your peace. You must pull away from the crowd sometimes. You must say no to good things so you can say yes to the necessary things. You must create space to ask yourself, how am I really doing? Not just emotionally, but spiritually. Am I still rooted? Am I still believing? Am I still surrendered? That kind of inward attention is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not selfishness, it's stewardship. You are stewarding the only soul you will ever have. And if you don't take the time to let God tend to it, you will begin to operate out of deficit, not overflow. You can't fulfill your calling if your soul is on life support. You can't hear clearly if your mind is cluttered. You can't walk in authority if your identity is fractured. That's why the enemy wants to keep you outwardly distracted, because he knows that as long as you avoid inward focus, you'll keep running but never arriving. You'll keep serving but never resting. You'll keep speaking but never healing, and you'll confuse motion for progress. But God wants more for you than activity. He wants intimacy. He wants alignment. He wants you whole. And wholeness starts in the heart. It starts in the place that no one claps for. The quiet place, the secret place, the inner sanctuary where you meet God with no agenda but to be seen, no performance, no masks, just you and him. That's where the breakthrough is. Not in the platform, not in the performance, not in the pretending, but in the presence, in the inward, honest, sometimes painful, always holy presence where God doesn't just patch you up. He rebuilds you. And rebuilding takes time, it takes patience, it takes grace. You won't heal overnight, you won't restore decades of damage in a week. But when you choose to focus inward, when you commit to the process, when you stop rushing and start resting, when you let the Word of God become more than a routine, when it becomes your mirror, your medicine, your truth, everything begins to change, not because the world outside changed, but because you did, because your heart shifted, because your thoughts aligned, because your identity became rooted, not in who left you, not in what broke you, but in who formed you and who still fights for you. That's the beauty of focusing inward with God. It's not just inspection, it's divine inspection. It's not just therapy for the soul, it's transformation for the spirit. Because he doesn't just point out the broken pieces, he replaces them. He gives beauty for ashes. He gives oil of joy for mourning. He gives a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. But you've got to come to him, not just with your hands lifted, but with your heart open. Not just on Sunday mornings, but in the stillness of your Tuesday afternoon. Not just in public worship, but in private honesty. You cannot fake your way into wholeness. You cannot hustle your way into purpose. You cannot bypass the inner work. God is too faithful to let you skip steps. He's too committed to your calling to let you stay broken. But he won't force you. He'll wait. He'll wait until you stop performing. He'll wait until you stop performing. He'll wait until you finally say, God, I'm ready to look within. And when you do, he won't shame you. He'll welcome you. He'll cover you. He'll start the healing because he's not afraid of what you've been through. He's not intimidated by how long it's been. He's not shocked by how far you've strayed. He just wants access. He just wants surrender. He just wants the real you. There is a big difference between serving from a place of knowing who you are in Christ and serving because you're hoping your work will somehow prove your worth. And that difference, it determines whether your service will bring you peace or leave you depleted. It determines whether you'll walk in joy or drag yourself in resentment. It determines whether your serving is spirit-led or insecurity-driven. Because if you don't know who you are before you start serving, you'll start using service as a tool to gain what can only be received through sonship, identity, value, approval, love. The problem isn't the service. Serving is good. Serving is necessary. But serving should never be used as a substitute for identity. It should be a result of identity. It should flow from the deep place where you know without question that you are already accepted, already loved, already chosen, already enough. But when that's not settled in your heart, you begin to use your gifts to earn a place at a table that God already reserved for you. You use your calling as a crutch for your insecurity. You use ministry as medication for your wounds. You use doing as a way to avoid being. And eventually you wear yourself out trying to become what you already are. When you don't serve from identity, you serve for validation. You say yes to things God never asked you to do. You stay busy because silence makes you nervous. You pour out because being still feels like failure. And if people applaud you, you feel seen. But when they don't, you feel invisible again. That is not service. That is survival. And God never called you to survive in his name. He called you to live in his truth. You are not what you do. You are who he says you are. And if that isn't settled, no amount of work will satisfy the ache in your soul. Insecurity will always drive you to do more than you were called to do. It will whisper that if you don't show up, the world will fall apart. It will tell you that your worth is directly tied to how much you perform, how many people notice, how many people praise you. And if you listen to it long enough, you'll confuse activity for purpose. You'll confuse exhaustion for holiness. You'll confuse applause for identity. But none of those things can sustain you, because when the applause stops, and it will, when the platform shifts, and it will, when the needs of others become endless, and they will, what will hold you, what will ground you, what will keep you from falling apart? And only identity, only the unshakable spirit-anchored, blood-bought truth that before you ever lifted a finger in service, you were already chosen, you were already called, you were already sealed, you were already qualified, not by works, not by effort, not by perfection, but by grace. That is the foundation. That is the place from which true service flows. Because when you serve from identity, you don't need the room to clap. You don't need to be seen. You don't need to be first. You don't need to say yes to everything. You serve from a place of peace, not pressure. You give from overflow, not obligation. You move from rest, not restlessness. When Jesus served, he served with authority, not anxiety. He didn't heal people to prove he was the Messiah. He healed because he already knew who he was. He didn't minister to the crowds because he needed approval. He ministered because compassion flowed from his confidence. He wasn't driven by people's needs. He was led by his Father's voice. He knew when to serve and when to retreat. He knew when to pour out and when to pull away. Why? Because he operated from identity. And if Jesus had to be rooted in identity to serve well, what makes us think we can serve any differently? When insecurity is at the root, even the most noble acts can become toxic. You start comparing your service to someone else's. You start competing with people you were called to walk alongside. You start needing results to feel successful. You start looking at numbers instead of hearts. You start chasing influence instead of intimacy. And all the while, your soul begins to shrivel because you're not drawing from the well of truth. You're drawing from the shallow pool of approval, and it will run dry every time. But when identity is the root, there's no competition. There's no striving. There's no desperation. You can celebrate others without feeling small. You can serve in secret without feeling overlooked. You can obey God's timing without feeling behind, because you're not trying to prove anything. You're just living out of what's already been proven. You are who He says you are. You belong. You are chosen. You are called. You are enough, not because of what you do, but because of what He did. The enemy doesn't mind if you serve, as long as your service is fueled by insecurity. Because then you'll stay tired, you'll stay distracted, you'll stay busy doing things that look good but bear no fruit. But when you start serving from identity, that's when you become dangerous. That's when you start walking in spiritual authority. That's when you start discerning which battles are yours and which ones are distractions. That's when you stop being reactive and start being intentional, because you're not trying to earn God's love, you're living from it. And that shift, though subtle, is everything. It's the difference between burnout and blessing. It's the difference between chasing purpose and carrying peace. It's the difference between constantly needing affirmation and walking in quiet confidence, because when you know who you are, you don't panic when seasons change. You don't lose yourself when roles shift. You don't fall apart when people walk away. You understand that your identity is not in what you do, it's in who you belong to. And that truth makes your service sustainable. Insecurity will always demand more of you than grace does. Insecurity says, do more, be more, prove more. Grace says, rest in who you already are. Insecurity makes you a slave to people's expectations. Grace makes you a servant of God's purpose. Insecurity says your worth is up for debate. Grace says your worth was settled at the cross. And when you finally let that truth sink in, when you finally let God define you, when you finally allow yourself to be loved without performing, you start to serve from a whole place, a healed place. You stop waiting to be validated. You stop trying to outrun your past. You stop needing everyone to understand you, because you know who sent you. You know who called you. And you know that if no one ever claps, if no one ever thanks you, if no one ever sees the sacrifices you make, He does. And that's enough, because you're not serving for identity. You're serving from it. That's the kind of service that breaks chains. That's the kind of service that brings heaven to earth. That's the kind of service that shifts atmospheres, not because it's flashy, but because it's rooted in truth, rooted in love, rooted in the unshakable confidence that even when your hands are busy, your heart is anchored, and nothing, no applause, no rejection, no outcome can take that away from you.